Okay, welcome to tonight's event with Austin Middleton at the George Mason Econ Society. We are a student organization that connects economists and graduate students here with students, and we offer lectures like these, law and economics seminars, in which just concluded at 5 earlier today, and we have a newsletter which you can subscribe to if you go to economics-society.org/signup, and we also have a blog at the same URL. And tonight, our speaker is a native son of Virginia, though he has a good taste for the root for Alabama Crimson Tide football. He earned his bachelor's of arts in economics here at George Mason in 2005 and his master's in 2012. And he's working toward his PhD in econ here. His dissertation research addresses the concept of justice in classical liberal philosophy, and his wife hopes he gets around to finishing the damn thing sometime this year. And besides his work in history of economic thought, he dips in his toes in the fields of monetary theory and public choice economics, and presently teaching public choice here at the university, in which I'm proud to be in his class. Ladies and gentlemen, Austin Middleton.
Good evening.
Slopes down.
Yeah, okay, look. Here's how this works. That was terrible. I say good evening, you all say this, and then I'll go ahead and carry on. So now that we've set the rules, let's try that again. Good evening.
Man slopes down.
Marginally improved. By the way, feel free to ask any clarifying questions that you have through the lecture. But if you're going to ask a substantive question, I would ask that you wait until the end, and I will be happy to address any that you have. What I am going to be covering here is comparative systems. What you have, and certainly there are degrees of this, this is not black and white, is governance through commercial order and governance through some imposed order. And I would like to adopt Adam Smith's rubric for discussing whether or not a system is any good, whether or not it should be kept around. And it has to be that it promotes the happiness of those who live under it. It could be the most beautifully designed system in the history of everything, but if the people underneath it are utterly miserable, then it's worthless, get rid of it. Hayek adopts the same thing, saying that, if socialism actually were able to achieve human welfare and happiness better than capitalism, he would support it. Happens to be that this is not the case. So, what are the qualities? What do we have in the extended commercial order? Certainly we have, as far as physical goods are concerned, property, consent, and contract, so that goods are exchanged on voluntary bases. People possess negative rights and exclusionary rights, such that I don't have the right to a jam sandwich. But if I have a jam sandwich, I can keep anybody else from taking it. So I'm able to exclude others from my property, but it's not the case that anyone who prevents me in any capacity from having a jam sandwich is violating my rights. So if I don't have a jam sandwich, and you, Wiley, do, then it's not the case that by keeping me away from it, my rights are being violated. Similarly, you have freedom of association, and implicit in this is a freedom of disassociation. If you're going to allow people to group together on their own voluntarily, then it cannot be the case that you also insist that they group with some of these people. So these two go hand in hand. Anytime that you force an individual to associate or exchange with another, you are violating freedom of disassociation, which is the exact same thing as freedom of association. What you would expect to find under this is self-defining emergent communities within society as a whole. Now, there are two main branches of argument for extended commercial order. And probably the most well-known, certainly the 20th century had extensive experiments in this sort of thing, is the productivity argument. And commercial order provides a system of prices, profit, and loss. And this has two large effects. It is, to a certain degree, an incentive system. It has, individuals are rewarded for helping others out, supplying their needs and wants. And you get some sort of entrepreneurship generation with that potential reward. More importantly, it's a system of knowledge dispersal. Because the important knowledge is divided, dispersed, it's local, and most critically, it decays. Knowledge does not wait around for it to be used. If you don't take advantage of something that you know right now, it's very likely conditions will change and that knowledge will no longer be there. What you see happening is you see scarce resources are valuable. They have a relatively high prices within that system. And so people know, I can't use this frivolously. And if there are any substitute for those resources, those substitutes will be identified and they'll be exploited to relieve the high prices of those goods. Now, the mirror to these arguments is the arguments against productivity, arguments against centrally imposed order. It's awkward to incentivize people. I mean, if you're worried about production, yes, you can certainly get someone to dig a trench by saying, look, you dig a trench for me in my backyard and I'll feed you lunch. Of course, another alternative is dig a trench or else hop two. So you can use both stick and carrot. It just so happens that in centrally imposed orders, you're going to be relying on the stick much more than the carrot. Similarly, because preferences are not going to be revealed through voluntary exchange, you've got a hard time figuring out what the relative prices of goods are. You don't know what to produce. You don't know how to satisfy people's preferences because they have no means of expressing them, or they have relatively limited means of doing so. You have a hard time coordinating because you have to send information up to the central authority and then you have to wait around. They get information from all these different disparate parts. They put a guy in a bureau and tell him to crunch the numbers and then he sends it out. And that time lag between these two is going to mean that, well, what you sent a month and a half ago may not be terribly relevant. You can't calculate prices, preferences, and most importantly, what Mises pointed out is that the system of equations that the socialist calculators thought that they could use to find out what prices should be, those cost functions are not given. Those cost functions have to be discovered. And the process of entrepreneurship is the process of finding new ways, inexpensive ways to produce goods that are fantastic for people. And then, of course, you have the public choice problem. Someone is centrally imposing production and, to a certain degree, consumption decisions. Well, why can you trust this person exactly? Why do you know that he is looking out for you? I mean, any arguments that commercial society is run by greedy robber barons, well, these people are going to exist in centrally ordered societies in the same way that they exist in commercial societies. It'd just be worse for them to actually be the commissar. So you can't trust those guys. Conclusion then. Individuals, therefore society is better under a extended commercial order. And that is the productivity argument. Everybody's healthier, they have more stuff, they can afford more things like, running water, indoor plumbing, food, I understand something that's terribly valuable in Venezuela is toilet paper. Yes. So these critical elements of society are better provided under commercial society. So that is, congratulations, in 5 minutes, you have the totality of a bachelor's degree in economics. You're welcome.
From a good university.
What's that?
From a good university.
Yeah, yes. Not just any old.
How do we become magna cum laude?
Keep the coffee coming.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but all this is talking about, all this argument is talking about the productive side of society. And this is not the productive side, the physical side, physical goods, things, stuff. Crass commercialism, I'm sure you've heard of it, is not everything. There exists more, and this is why these productive arguments for extended commercial society are vulnerable to this. There is more to man than himself and his own personal needs. There's that which exists between people. If you read any of the poets, and you should, then you'll know that it's in the giving to others that's important. That is actually truly important that we do once, of course, we have our running water and toilet paper. Adam Smith agreed. Enjoy this wall of text. Essentially, what it is, by the way, find it here. Since you have your books with you, turn to section 4, chapter 1, paragraph 8. The man who's sacrificed tranquility in order to work hard all his life to attain comfortable living can find out at the end that these are mere trinkets of frivolous utility. No more adapted for procuring the ease of body or tranquility of mind than the tweezer cases of the lover of toys. Think of that the next time you pull out your iPhone. You have a 21st century tweezer case. So, why did I start thinking of this? That this needs to be addressed. This argument against commercial society, because it's so productive, was when I was talking with Dan D'Amico, who's a former PhD student here. He's down at Loyola right now, and I was saying that Adam Smith was advocating for. The reason he was advocating for free markets was because he was humanistic. He wanted to achieve good results for humanity. And D'Amico came back flippantly and said this: the market has no teleology. And I said, well, that's interesting. That's incredibly fascinating. It's very insightful, and I found it to be even more so.
What is teleology?
When I found out what it meant. He's trying to say that the extended commercial order, the market system, is not driven by purposes. It enables people to achieve their own purposes. So when you start to, you say like the ship of state. What do you envision when you envision a ship sailing through the Atlantic? You've got these fantastic sails. You've got this spar sticking out the front. You've got a whole bunch of guys in the rigging, and captain, big hat, at the helm. Right? The helm is pretty important. But the market has no teleology. There is no helm. And this is incredibly disturbing to people. Incredibly disturbing, not least, to Pope Francis. And what he advocated for in his apostolic exhortation of this past November, which was something of a crisis of faith for me, was that the financial system needs to serve a purpose, a specific purpose. The market and financial system cannot simply be allowed to enable people to explore and attain their own purposes. No, rather the system itself has to be geared towards providing for others, the poor. Money must serve. What do you serve? A purpose. So, how can the market satisfy these group preferences if all it does, by construction, is enable individuals to satisfy their own? So if I'm going to come up with a humanistic support for commercial society, it has to be able to answer these two questions. Why would commercial order, which enables several purposes, satisfy community demands? Right? The needs of the group, the needs of the space between people. Why would it do this? What mechanism exists? And then secondly, that's great, thank you for your theory. Do you have evidence that this is the case? And here we come upon, after 15 minutes, the reason you're here, because I'm going to tell you. And you will applaud. Right. So let's start from the micro interrelationships between two people. So the mechanic. All moral judgments are enshrouded in sympathy. Right. Part one. What does this mean? It means that when Bex observes and judges Olivia, he does so in a sympathetic way. Now, sympathy means something different from, I think, that the casual 20th century meaning is. Essentially, it's Beckham thinking, if I were in her place, would I have reacted in the same way? So, if Olivia is huddled in the corner and a little puddle of emotions weeping, and Bex walks in and says, huh. His ability to actually enter into the circumstances surrounding Olivia's condition are going to guide whether or not he thinks that what she's doing, being a small little puddle in the corner of the room, is virtuous, or just, or right, or praiseworthy, alternatively blameworthy, whether she should be roundly condemned, like this is not the time and the place. Time and place has a lot to do with this. So Bex walks in. Now it's possible he could walk in and see, simpering fool, and then carry on with his day. So he does not enter very far into Olivia's passions. Alternatively, it may be that he knows very well who she is. I mean, this helps, having met her before. Helps that she knows what exactly happened to her. What is the cause? What is she reacting to? And if he knows enough, he can fully enter into her passion. And even if she is a complete slave to her emotions at that moment, he might think, I would do the same. Now, this is what we might call empathy. Empathy is a 20th century word, though. Smith never uses it. But the observer entering into the actor could very well be where empathy would be placed within Smith. And then you have the respectable virtues. So Olivia knows that no one likes to see someone huddled in the corner, reduced to tears, sobbing uncontrollably. This is an unpleasant thing. Now, even if you kind of want to console her, they're there. Even if you want to do that, it's not a terribly pleasant thing for you to do. So, what she'll try to do, choke back her tears, and wait till she's alone. And if she can't really do that very well, then she'll still be a puddle of tears in the corner. And she will not have distanced herself very far from her passions. Alternatively, if she endures whatever trials were before her, and in fact sympathetically exchange places with some observer, and immediately stops crying, pulls herself together, takes a deep breath, breathes normally, and carries on. And the reason she does this is because she knows it's unpleasant for Bex to have to deal with a sobbing puddle of person. So Olivia is going to judge the propriety of her own actions based upon how far she can separate herself from her own passions. Now, in the sympathetic interaction here, it happens simultaneously. Bex judges Olivia. Olivia judges herself. Does Olivia have a stiff upper lip? No. But Olivia thinks that's just fine. Bex doesn't think so. So he disapproves of what she's doing, while she does approve of what she's doing. Or, possibly, they sort of meet in the middle. But here's the thing. It's not just the case that her sobbing in the corner in a puddle is the only thing around there to be judged. Oh no, welcome to recursion. Because Bex is judging Olivia. Guess what Olivia can judge? Bex's judgment of Olivia. Guess what Bex can judge? Olivia's judgment of Bex's judgment of Olivia. And so on and so forth ad infinitum. You can always find something else. Was it proper of me to judge that person as harshly as I did? We may find ourselves asking this question. Should I have been so harsh? No. So you are exchanging places with some third party and viewing yourself as you would like to be viewed. So, just so you know, I want a standing ovation at the end of the lecture. This goes without saying. Those of you who are in my class this semester, pay attention. But consider that praise, it's not just enough that I be praised. I also have to think, Middleton, well done, good lecture. Let's go have a beer and a smoke. Right? I have to think that I worked hard enough, I performed well enough, that you are right to stand and applaud me. And you will, of course, join me in that sympathy. So this is the impetus. This is how man updates and changes his future actions. Because not only does he want to be loved by other people, but he wants to be lovely. And implicit in that is an expectation and an understanding of how other people are going to judge you. And so you change your actions to better suit other people so that you can have this harmony of sentiment. And this creates a feedback loop between two individuals encountering the same situation over and over again. Perhaps the first time way up at the top, they don't have any, there's a real dissonance between the two of them. One of them thinks it's proper to cry your heart out, and someone else thinks, get yourself together. And then the next time it happens, well, the crier, brings a tissue and quiets the sobs just a touch. Because the crier wants to be, Olivia, let's say, Olivia wants to be lovely. She wants to be praiseworthy of Bex. But so too does Bex. He's going to shift his estimation of what is proper for Olivia. Partially because he's going to be more familiar with her conditions. He's going to be able to more fully enter into her enter her passions. You do this over and over and over again. Sometimes you miss, you get closer, you get further apart, and then you wind up establishing some degree of propriety. So with iterations, Olivia and Beckham have decided that's right. That's right there. Olivia is more or less going to stifle her cries, but Beckham is going to enter into those cries that she does exhibit more perfectly. So, propriety is not monolithic. It is a multitude. It can contain any number of things for any number of circumstances. Mitigation is a word that would apply here. When you stub your toe, do not sob and weep. When this happens, feel free. Because this is possibly one of the greatest calamities to befall man. Good thing it rarely happens. So, English-made common law is somewhat a model of this. We are all judges in the court of propriety. All these different proprieties of what should a person do in a particular circumstance. You view it, you judge it. If anybody tells you to not be judgmental, feel free to judge them, because they don't know what they're talking about. You view them, you judge them, you praise or blame them in your head. Perhaps you are so animated such that you praise or blame them vocally. Now, propriety shifts. Should I wear a bathing suit while lecturing? No, I think that would be improper, certainly odd. Tuxedo, certainly so. Now, is the kilt appropriate? Now, I've provided an observation that is, generally speaking, outside what people normally encounter. So by my wearing plaid, I'm allowing you to generate new opportunities for examining what is proper, what is good, what is praiseworthy, and if a kilt is appropriate to wear while lecturing. The answer is yes. Now, some people direct these sorts of proprieties more than others. If you're talking about economics, when you think, okay, Middleton, I'm sitting down to write this paper, who should I strive to satisfy? Not him. I'm going to go with Milton Friedman. And so, Milton Friedman's estimation of what is good and proper is going to matter more for me. And his sense of propriety, his former judgments are going to guide me into what it is that I should do, what is right and proper. It's going to inform my sense of morality. Now, you do this enough, and you've generated social norms. You're no longer in a space just between two people. You're within a community. Here, all of us. Right now, we know that kilts create things. Right? Propriety's established. We know when I say good evening, you respond with?
And slopes down.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of you know it anyway. So you coordinate group sympathies, but simply because you have one set of propriety within a group doesn't mean that all groups are going to have similar proprieties. This is, I love it when Smith talks about the French. He does so a few times. And so the Frenchman is going to tell this utterly irrelevant tale with passion in French, which is a passionate language. And you have the Englishman who is going to say something along the lines of, well, I didn't lose my entire family to the house fire. And one is proper in England, and the other is proper in France. And so you have these competing norms. English rectitude versus French passion. Occasionally, the English and the French meet. And what happens when the English and French meet is this. This sort of conflict is the consequence of expression, gesticulation. Yes. So when you have an Englishman and a Frenchman meet, the Frenchman fully indulges his passions to tell this story about a loaf of bread. Quel horreur! That was French just now, by the way. Meanwhile, the Englishman listening to this story, about which he knows, a bloody loaf of bread, thinking, French. Meanwhile, the house fire, and he says, yes, we were able to save most of the children. And you get this, and I would love to be able to say this fluently, because I'm sure it's beautiful. Now, don't get me started on what happens when you throw Germans into the mix. So, how can we model this? Simply right here. But this is not the end of the story. This happens the first time. This Englishman, who's listening to a French story, may never have the opportunity to encounter Frenchmen and what is normal for them to do. But given time and given interactions, he can say, oh, yes, this is a Frenchman telling a ridiculous story, but he's French. And so, because he's French, it's appropriate. Now, you'll still have some dissonance between the Englishman and the Frenchman in terms of propriety of telling stories about loaves of bread and burning houses. You certainly will. But at least there will be less disharmony. You may say that this is an example of when in Rome, adopt local customs, because that is the best way to get around. So, harmony between groups of people, then, by this model, is a function of the speed and the force of the feedbacks between interacting individuals. Because there's only ever individuals interacting between each other. Groups don't interact, commonly. Individuals from those groups interact. Even when you have a group of Englishmen over here and a group of Scots over here, it's not the English versus the Scots. No, it's these English and these Scots. And you all know the end of this story, right? We all saw Braveheart. So when you're looking at social orders, making use of this mechanism to generate proprieties, the social order that is going to have a stronger feedback mechanism for what is right, what is good, what is virtuous, and what is proper, this is going to harmonize even groups of individuals, whereas social orders that diminish these things will do the reverse. You will, of course, have heterogeneity, but that's part of it. You're not going to have this one great group mass unity where we all come together, which everybody thinks is such a great idea. No. Because if everybody's going to come together, then what is everybody going to have? Everybody's going to have the same preferences. Good luck. Good luck trying to convince someone to have all the same preferences. Be much better off to force them. So if you're ever thinking about unity, I recommend coercion. Heard it here first. And my argument is that the freedom of association and its converse, disassociation, is going to achieve this. So a social order that bears the most hallmarks of this is going to be that which has the most harmonious society, the most persistently virtuous society. So you have to allow people to engage in trade with whom they please, or not. How is this going to increase harmony between people? You come into my shop, I say, go away. I don't like English people because I'm Scottish. What is the commercial order's function? How am I punished? We'll get to that. You may live where you please. Taken to its fullest extent, this means free immigration anywhere and everywhere. You want to leave? You can leave. You can say what you please. But, of course, all at the same time, this is subject to exclusionary principles of property. So, for instance, it would be a nuisance if you came up to the edge of someone's property and started yelling at them day in and day out. Now, you haven't stepped foot on it, perhaps, but still, I suspect that given rules of property, that would be a no-no. Okay, so answer the question: why would commercial order do these things theoretically? Okay, well, first of all, if you're talking about helping people who are in fantastically dire circumstances, and we've already accepted the fact, because it's true, that commercial society is more productive, it has a more productive use of resources, there aren't going to be as many people sitting around who need help from others. Now, certainly you may choose to be the kind of person who needs help, but individual circumstances are less and less often going to force people into destitution when you have a ruling extended commercial order that is governing folks. But the humanitarian angle, communities with shared values form more readily and rapidly because people can sort themselves into groups with whom values they share. They're going to be able to put themselves with people that they like and agree with. And so they don't have to hang out with, me all day and hear about the Crimson Tide, because you're from Kentucky and have no idea about anything related to football. And so being told what football is going to be rough for you. It's going to lower the cost of moral action because you're going to better know what moral action is. Propriety is clear and it's established. It's going to be able to coordinate geographically disparate sympathies. Now, what does this mean? Think of a market for sympathies in the same way that there is a market for pencils. Leonard Reed's eye pencil. How do you make a pencil? There's products that are shipped in from the East Coast, from the West Coast, from abroad, from north to south, and they are all coordinated in such a way as to achieve pencil. And yet no one individual with that entire process is even capable of knowing everything that it takes to generate a pencil. So in the same way that economic resources can be coordinated and communicated, sympathies could too. And probably what worries most people is that it imposes the cost of immoral action properly. Now, the cost of immorality. So I'm Scottish, and I know a little something about Campbell's and McDonald's. They didn't like each other about 400 years ago, and therefore they still don't like each other. So here I am, merchant of Glasgow, and I have the option to hire either Angus or Hamish. Now, I don't like Angus. Why? He's a Campbell. Now, it's not a good thing to dislike Campbells. We're going to go ahead and agree here. We're men of humanity, we in this room who like kilts. We all agree that it is a nice thing, it is a good thing for both Angus and Hamish to have employment. And they're perfectly equal in every other way besides, maybe red hair, but name, yeah? So, what should their wages be? If we mandate that their wages must be 10 pounds per hour, or whatever, and I don't like Angus, what's the cost of my choosing Hamish over Angus? Well, nothing. Because if I hired Hamish, whom I don't like, because he's a Campbell, then I'm going to have this just disagreeable thoughts about that guy who works for me all day long. Why would I do that? Why would I bear that cost when instead I can hire Hamish for the exact same price and think, yeah, excellent. Not a Campbell. If, however, Hamish and Campbell are able to contract and negotiate for their salaries, so Hamish says, I'll work for 10. Angus says, I'll work for 5. What is the cost of my dislike, my immoral dislike for Angus? It's 5 pounds. I actually bear a financial burden for a moral, rather immoral choice that I've made. So if you're going to be going out looking for people to punish, no, you don't need to do that. You just hand them their own rope. They will hang themselves. And honestly, if he says, I'd rather have 5 pounds an hour than have Hamish around, well, great. We like that, right? We like the fact that Angus is working and he is employed. Hooray. Fantastic. And what do we expect will happen with this model? What do we expect will happen as Angus repeatedly interacts with his boss? Sympathies with each other, becoming more familiar with each other's conditions. You are more able to fully enter into that rat bastard Angus's condition. And maybe he's not such a bastard after all. Even if he is. You can understand him. So, and here we go. Okay, that's great. Thank you, theory. What proof do you have? So, has commerce and goods increased humanitarian agency? I certainly recommend this book, Mutual Aid to the Welfare State. Incidentally, if you all want homework, there's stuff up here. There's a reading list for various things. You can get it later. Wherein he argues that because welfare was not provided by the state, people formed together in mutual aid societies because helping other people is a good and moral thing to do. Commercial society does not reject this. So when you had these mutual aid societies, what they had, they were right there. They had very good local knowledge. They knew who aid should go to, and that if an individual wanted to receive help from this particular group of people, they had to do what? Conform to a greater degree to the proprieties that those mutual aid societies required. But what happened when the state decided that it was the state's responsibility to provide aid to these people? Now let's say that they are transferring the exact same amount of money to folks who are desperate. What's a desperate person going to do? I can either take money from a mutual aid society and sort of do what they say, or take money from the municipal authority. Yeah, you don't have to do anything else. relatively speaking, right? What are they going to do? You're going to see a group of people flocking who need help. Like there's no argument. They need help. You're going to see people flocking to the municipal authority because why? It's lower cost. There's less cost in terms of what they have to do. So yes, these mutual aid societies did break up because no one was patronizing them any longer. And so you saw the death, especially in New York City and New York State, you saw the death of humanitarian aid from centrally imposed orders. Alternatively, imposed orders are net importers of humanity. Why? Because they don't have stuff. They don't have toilet paper, clean water. They need these things. And surely they're not going to be helping out anybody else if they're worried about whether or not they're going to survive the next week. Now, has extended commercial order in migration. How has this helped humanity between people, if people are able to move one place or another? Well, for one, there's a much greater degree of opportunity for productivity in commercial societies. So let's say Frank moves here, is more productive, and therefore, as we know, gets paid more because he's more productive. This is how that works. Gets paid more, and he's able to send money back to Mom and Pop Frank. Talk about local knowledge. Mom and Pop Frank, they're in bad straits back home in the old world. They need help. Well, Frank knows this, which is why he's sending them money. So yes, if you enable that sort of immigration, you're going to be generating humanitarian aid without lifting a bloody finger. Alternatively, if immigrants are no longer in a place that sucks, there are fewer people in a place that sucks that needs help. It sort of works, right? Now, certainly there are concerns if you are worried about concerns about immigration. Brian Kaplan does address these things. It's in there, but from the humanitarian argument, it is absolutely the case that you want to have open borders. Now, occasionally people are going to say immigrants take jobs from natives. Well, okay, so we're being humanitarian here, right? So we're going to say that people are equal, right? Me living well is not any better necessarily than that guy over there living well. So on humanitarian grounds, raising immigration restrictions is utter nonsense. Because it's simply saying natives are better than immigrants. This is humanitarian in well, no, it's not humanitarian. And if you look at the immigration or immigration restrictions of imposed orders, when they build walls, it is not to keep people out. This is fantastic. Here's West Berlin. There is layer upon layer upon layer of technique, scientifically developed technique. They have automatic shooting machine guns. Cool science stuff, right? Yeah. In East Berlin, in order to stop people from simply leaving. Simply being able to say, you know what? East Germans, I love you, great athletes and all, but I'd like toilet paper. Let's be honest. What about commerce and ideas? Here we have some two very related social commodities. Am I not a man and a brother? Talking about whether or not this individual has property in and of himself. Does he get the full rule of law and protection of law? Anybody who's on Facebook, which which I imagine is not some of you, is going to be familiar with this. And all this is saying, strictly speaking, now people may also be saying other things, but strictly speaking, is that two individuals should be able to enter into a contract whereby property is assigned in a certain way in the event of someone's death. That does not sound particularly offensive to me. Right. Anyway, the freer communication of these sorts of ideas they're going to be, and the more often these things are going to be encountered, arguments against them are going to be forced out. Is there an argument against slavery? Yeah. Arguments against marriage equality? Yeah, absolutely. And if they are robust, they'll stand. And if they are not, they won't. They will change. Some people won't like that. Okay, sorry. But happily, commercial order, so you can tell people to get off your lawn all you like. So this idea has been around for a while, right? Like this sort of evidence, certainly maybe not as sophisticatedly presented, but the evidence for increased production was there, and the evidence for humanitarianism was there. Does anybody know? Did someone tell Pope Francis? He should know. He should know about this. Because I bet you, if you make this argument convincingly to him, because I've got the Pope's ear, which is nice, then he might put out a very different apostolic exhortation next November. So, why? Why hasn't this just blown over like wildfire? What's restraining it? Well, what model of governance are we all familiar with? Every single one of us is most familiar with the command order, imposed order. I mean, I love it. I do it all the time to my son and my students. And let me tell you, it works. But why does it work? Why does it work in the small scale model? Because I am very familiar with my boy. And I'm very familiar, less so, but I'm familiar with my students. And I know what they're going through. And so I'm able to sympathize very well with them. And I'm able to adapt very well with them. How are you going to tell me that representative agents from a large society are similarly equipped? You've got humongous scalability issues here. How is someone supposed to sympathize with you if they don't know that you exist? And this is the case with most governments. Similarly, you've got this progressive polity ownership. The United States belongs to us. And what you all have is a leasehold on that patch of dirt that you're mining in Texas. But we can make the rules because we're the overlords, we being the polity, so we can set standards about what you can and cannot do. And I've heard this sort of argument from both sides of the current political aisle, saying that no, this is ours, this belongs to us, it's Americans, can't go anywhere else. Nonsense. Certainly can. Things belong to individuals. And if individuals want to, they can contract with other individuals to own things as a group. Of course, if you follow that logic, oh, well, didn't we contract to own everything back in 1789? Oh, okay, good question. Then you can start to talk about the legitimacy of contracts that were not authorized by the individuals who are working with them now. And the answer is no. And lastly, and I think probably most convincingly, is that the ship of state, having someone at the helm, is intuitive. Having focused goals. We want this. We is powerful. It's a powerful word. We want to come together and we want to achieve this. We want to put a man on the moon. Why? It's cool. Yeah, okay. It's cool. You got a nice sound bite. You know, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Mankind, great. It's a we word. Us. We did this. It's focal, it's intuitive, and people derive a very real pleasure from it. And so that is what keeps us back from instituting on humanitarian grounds an extended commercial order. So, argument. You get the review, right? Why does commercial society further humanitarian feelings and harmony among men? Why does it foster these sorts of things? It lowers the cost of moral action by coordinating sympathies, by communicating sympathies across great distances. It sustains good proprieties and eliminates unfavorable proprieties. So, and similarly, it increases the costs of immoral action and applies the cost of immoral action to those people who are acting immorally. Which is another way of saying demand slopes down. Thank you very much. The last thing I have to say is roll tide. Okay. Yes, excellent. Yes.